it was funny. I kind of threw shade at him a little bit. I was coming after him like, this is how we're going to dice up your 4-4 defense kind of thing. And luckily, he took it well and was like, I love this. And so the conversation we had in the Coliseum with Secret Service all parked up the tunnel. For those that have been to the Coliseum, you know how big that tunnel is. You're talking 3 Suburbans up there and having to get wanded in the whole deal. But we had a 5-minute conversation about the 4-4 defense, how he would adjust to today's game, how he would defend guys like Justin Jefferson and Randy Moss and Adrian Peterson and all that.
Welcome back, or welcome to Y Option. I am your host, Yogi Roth. As always, thank you for joining us and being a part of our day. We are so excited because it is week 8, which is we are technically in the back half of this season. We've got rule changes or amendments, loopholes, if you will. Jim Thornby, of course, co-founder of Y Option, joins us. Jim, you will be all over that. Yeah. We also have some fun games.
Sorry, I had to chuckle at that one.
You had to chuckle at that one, right? We'll get into that a little bit. I'll give you a little opinion on that. We've got, I think, the best individual matchup of the year in college football, and Travis Hunter and Tetairoa McMillan. Let us know if you disagree. Like, think about that for a minute. I think, have the best receiver in America against the best everything in America. Let's hope they both are at their very best on Saturday night. We'll talk about that. And we bring in somebody I've known for a long, long time. That's right. Max Browne, the lead analyst at the CW, doing ACC and even some Pac-12 games. He got a Pac-12 game this weekend. He also is a former intern of mine, also former Elite 11 quarterback. Just so proud to call him a friend and a fellow Pitt Panther. So how about that? So that conversation is coming up soon as well. But Jim, let's first get to you. How are we doing as week 8 and life continues to give us this beautiful gift of college football? How you doing, man?
Yeah, doing good. I feel like I've been in the Oregon zone like since, for over a week now, since we did Verone last week, and we talked to Nicole earlier this week about Nicole Auerbach earlier this week about the game, and then the news just keeps kind of coming out from there. So I feel, even though this is actually a Pat's run, thank you, Doug Tamaro, but it is kind of Oregon Duck colors here. So, yeah, and I'm wearing a CFP hat here, so maybe that's some foreshadowing for the Ducks as well. But yeah, very, very Duck centric in my life currently.
You know what? We both did it. I got my green shirt on. Yeah. If you've seen it, I made a little change here. If anybody's paying attention, there's subtleties in the studio, okay? These are shoes given to me by Oregon during the pandemic. I did a keynote speech for them, like on Zoom, to the athletic department around mindfulness and just things that we all kind of needed. Anyway, they sent me a pair of these Jordans. And my line this week, at least on the Big Ten Network, and I'll say it here as well, is that like Dylan Gabriel's filling those shoes pretty good for Bo Nix. So keep an eye on the set.
It will be a Friday night for mindfulness for Oregon because,
go there.
Get the segue going in there.
Let's get it going.
I mean, because how we both hate the term trap game. Like, that's like so annoying. However, like, this is every element of where you actually would be able to say that. You're coming off a ginormous win, arguably the biggest win in program history. It's a Friday night game. You've got the cross country travel going on there that UCLA and USC kind of shot in the foot, that stat over the weekend. So you got all those things coming around, and then it's how do you it's funny because we went back. Tanner kind of put something together for us from the Dylan Gabriel interview from this summer, talking from when he talked about like not getting too up and not getting too down, and like how do you like stay there. So it's like, how do you like not feel yourself, feel how big you are right now coming off a game like that?
Yeah, it's a fair question, and I think there's a couple reminders. The athletes playing, for the most part, are like 18 to 22, maybe 23 now in this era of college football. And there's distractions, whether that's college, because you still go to class, whether that is campus, whether that is your social life, whether that is your personal life. Like there's things that come to play. And I think what we've seen in college football forever, whether it's Georgia when they went on a run, or Bama's run, or SC's run, or maybe now Oregon's run, is that like you're never going to be perfect. Like you're going to come up and you're going to have a dud. Like you're going to have a night where it's just a little off on the timing from quarterback to receiver. And you're right. Friday night in Purdue is that opportunity for Oregon to potentially, I don't think they're going to get beat, but to maybe not play their best. Okay, why? You're playing a Purdue team that just lost in overtime in one of the most classic games that, not a lot of people probably talked about because of last weekend and all the epic games that there were. But they play a ranked top 25 Illinois team on the road. It's a sellout. They're getting drilled. And all of a sudden they mount this comeback only to lose in OT. In addition to that, their head coach has done something I have never seen before. Their head coach, who earlier this season let go of our good friend Graham Harrell, their offensive coordinator, and then he turned over the play calling to an analyst on his staff who had never called plays in college football. And then he decided this past weekend to take over the offensive play calling himself. Jim, the only time I've seen that is with our Paris Musketeers, my favorite team in European football, where our head coach last year took over calling the defense and the offense. So now for Ryan Walters at Purdue, he's not calling the defense, but he's calling the offense. He's a defensive-minded guy. He's never called plays offensively, and he did a heck of a job. So here you are at Oregon. It's no longer the air raid. The tendencies are through the roof, or they're long gone. Hudson Card is not going to be the starting quarterback who was, pumped up all offseason, rightfully so, as the quarterback he could have been. He's banged up, so he's not going to go, I don't anticipate, in this ball game, or at least he won't start. So for Oregon, like there's a lot of elements that are unique. And now you add on that place. I was there for the first time in my life this summer. The stadium's pretty dope. And for our listeners who know college football on the West Coast really well, think Oregon State, right? It's going to be raucous. It's going to be, I think they're going to wear all black uniforms. Like it's going to be bonkers. The student section is like a soccer game. They stand in the end zone and they stand the whole time. Like I don't even think there's seats. Like it's a standing section. So it will be as loud, as crazy of an environment that Oregon has been in all season, right? It'll be similar to when they went and played at Oregon State a couple weeks ago. So you're right. Alert. I wouldn't call it upset alert, trap alert to your point. No doubt. But I think for Dan Lanning, a Friday night helps because you don't have time to really feel yourself. You got to get right back into the game plan. And then I'll go back to my favorite line. Connection, growth, toughness, and sacrifice. Those DNA traits of Dan Lanning. And I think this team will lean into those. To me, they're the most improved team in America. I think they show it again on Friday. So there it is. That's my take on all things trap game.
Well, it's funny too, because like no one's really talking about the Friday game. All anybody is talking about this week is Dan Lanning and the play at the end of the game. Now I know like earlier in the week when you talked to Nicole Auerbach, you were hesitant to say that that's exactly what he was doing. And he had his presser on, what was that, Monday night? And so he was asked about it, and he kind of described what they did. And then everybody rolled with, oh, he admitted that he did it. He didn't. I mean, I'm not saying that he did or didn't do it. It's seeming more and more like that's probably what they did do. But he didn't actually come out and say, oh, yeah, that's what we did. Like, and he's been doing more interviews. Wednesday morning he was on Dan Patrick, and it felt like it was even a little bit more of a kernel there. But I mean, it's funny. Like they've already, like the NCAA has already weighed in and been like closing the loophole on that. Whether he did or didn't do it, he ain't doing it no more. Because now the loophole that they close is now after the 2-minute warning of either half. What they'll do in a situation like that, they'll still take the penalty and then reset the game clock to the previous snap. So the strategy of that is now pretty much out the window. I mean, it's funny because I saw people kind of.
What is the penalty going to be? Is it 15?
It's still the same penalty that it was.
Okay.
That it was. It's just taking the clock back so that you don't get that clock advantage. And I saw people like comparing it this week to like, at the end of a basketball game when you're up 3 points, you foul to not let that person shoot. And it's so like that. It's funny why is this? I mean, both are kind of like messing with the rule book, finding the loopholes. And, if it's not against the rules, is it really a thing? Like, but I was curious as to why like this became such a probably because just it was such a big game. I think if this was just some random game, it wouldn't have attracted this such a fury of attention and instantaneous update to the rule book, because in a basketball game you see it. I mean, almost every game of a team like fouling so that the guy can't shoot a three. And or how about if a defensive back knows he's beat, he's pulling the receiver down so he's not getting six. I mean, again, it's taking a penalty because you think the penalty is better than what the other thing will be on that. So I don't know.
Okay, so I got two thoughts on that. Okay, I have a ridiculous hypothetical, and then I have my thought.
I love ridiculous hypothetical.
Okay, so let me give you my thought on Dan Lanning first, so when you clip this out, it actually has some symmetry to it. I believe that Dan Lanning, and we've said it really for about a year, 8 months, 9 months, is that once Saban and Harbaugh left college football, he was going to take the oxygen up in the room. I believe he's done that. I believe he's only going to continue to do that. I don't think this Oregon program is slowing down by any stretch. I think they're just getting going. And I love his leadership traits. Again, I go back to those DNA traits. I love who he is. He's been on this podcast before, talked about the influence of his wife and when she was diagnosed with cancer and how it impacted him as a coach. We saw it impact literally Oregon's uniforms 2 weeks ago. Like, I just think he's what's right in a lot of ways about the sport. And the sport has changed. And he's adapted, and he's at a place that can adapt to all those changes. I also think there's a world where he's like a master marketer, right? Let's just rewind the clock. Last year, offseason, Nick Saban retires. What is the dialogue? Dan Lanning, you tracking planes. Is he going? Is he not? Dan Lanning wasn't going anywhere. Dan Lanning said very clearly the grass is pretty damn green in Oregon. But what did he do? He waited it out. He knew he wasn't going anywhere. But what did Oregon do? They built up a marketing machine to take advantage of the opportunity of everybody thinking he was going to dip, to triple, quadruple down on he was going to stay. And what did you see? Recruit. And all of a sudden, Oregon taking full advantage of the narrative for their own benefit. I think right now, whether he did it on purpose or didn't do it on purpose, I still don't have a lean dramatically either way, because he hasn't said it either way. And I want to be thoughtful in that regard. But right now, the narrative is that Dan Lanning's the smartest coach in college football. And that Dan Lanning found a way to utilize the rules to his advantage against one of the bluest of blue bloods in the history of this sport that we all love. And if I'm Oregon, if I'm Dan Lanning, I'm saying we are leaning into this. Right, wrong, indifferent, loophole, no loophole. Who gives a rip? Oregon right now is the smartest coach in college football, at least for the next handful of days until games come again. And I love that he has done all the media that he's done on a short week. I love it. I love it, man. This is what college football is. You have to take advantage of your window in time. He has literally just did what how many guys have done? Belichick post Super Bowl against our boy Jared Goff and the Rams. It was change the defense after the headset turns off. Loophole, right? How many times have we seen that? Very few in the last decade in all levels of football where it's become this big of a story. And it's always about the acumen of the head coach who made that decision. Props to Dan Lanning. Whether you did it or you didn't, keep leaning into that.
Yeah, I saw a clip from Urban Meyer today on Twitter from the podcast that they do with the Fox guys. It was him and Rob Stone and Mark Ingram. And Urban was talking about, like, he couldn't believe, like, Urban was so blown away that if this was, like, done on purpose, like, that he was even thinking like that. And, like, so that just in some of the coaching circles, it's funny because I also saw another clip over the week with Rick Neuheisel, and he was just like, don't trust the defensive coaches. They're always coming up with something. But it was just like, I think it's kind of sent shockwaves to the coaching, some of the coaches at least, of being like, oh wow, like this is like some next level thinking right here. I think Urban's line was, I've been playing checkers all this time.
We need like our friend who was just on, take a listen this week, Nicole Auerbach from NBC. She's an insider and analyst. You need one of those anonymous polls, Nicole, where you talk to head coaches and be like, did you even know this was a rule? Because I've talked to a few and none of them did. So I want a bigger sample size. Okay, here's my crazy hypothetical, and then we're gonna get moving. We got Max coming up. We got other games we got to get to. If your team was this close to going to the playoff, let's just pretend Brent Brennan in Arizona, they go on a run. We're going to get to their game against Colorado here in a minute. And all of a sudden, they're in their final game of the season, call it the Big 12 championship game. And they're up a score. They're up 5. And the opponent is racing down the sideline, your sideline, and your head coach or somebody on the staff does something to stop them. Obviously, it's a penalty. Obviously, it is an act dramatically uncommon to the game. And it is immoral, no integrity, like all of the things. But if you win the game because of that immoral act, are you cool with that? Because your team just made it to the playoff. That's my that's crazy hypothetical. But I think about it sometimes when you see a guy racing down the sideline, like, that's why you're a man of integrity.
That's the one too far. Like, I don't have I don't really, before this was a rule or loophole or whatever, I had no problem with that. Like, I thought, like, you're exploiting the rules to your advantage.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that's different than like just a straight out like disregard for any sort of morality at all there.
That was Mike Tomlin, right? A year ago.
That's one too far for me.
Yeah, I would agree with you clearly, but I thought of it because wasn't it Mike Tomlin who was like, look, was he looking up at the jumbotron, and all of a sudden he found his way out into the field of play, and the player ran into him, like, or the ref ran into him, or something happened like that. Anyway, all right, we're moving on. That was bonkers, but hey, we're having thoughtful dialogue. Okay, so let's talk about. Let's just put a loop and a button on the Big Ten.
Ready, set. Use French fries to go. Yeah, oil from French fries. Turn yesterday's leftovers into today's fuel. More power, lower emissions. 76 renewable diesel fuels all the ways you go, go, go.
I'm going to take my first trip to Rutgers for a game since I was wearing that beautiful helmet, the Pitt Panthers back there, when I had a nice little 17-yard dig route, a nice little catch against the Scarlet Knights in 2002 or whatever it was. I'm going there for the UCLA game. Two teams that desperately need a win. The Bruins were this close. You can call it 1, 2, 3 snaps away from getting their first conference win. Can they do that? How about USC? They still yet have had a conference win. They need one as well, Jim. So it'll be fun this week. Both teams going East SC to play Maryland. Eric Gentry, he's going to redshirt due to concussions. Got to know Eric really well, I think, since he was a freshman at Arizona State. His time at USC. Want to wish him the absolute best in his recovery. I also think on the field, you felt the presence. If he's on the field, does Tyler Warren have a record-setting Saturday? I would think not. He still have a big game, but I don't know if he has 17 grabs. So with that said, Big Ten, we'll see what happens with that. Nebraska and Indiana, big shout out to my Pittsburgh guys, Coach Signetti and company. I'm going to go to Indiana next week, Jim, for Washington at Indiana, 9 a.m. Pacific. So that'll be a big one. If they can beat Nebraska, that'll only set up for a better game for us this week. So or next week.
they got big noon kickoff in for that game this week for Nebraska, Indiana, and with Ohio State and Penn State both off this week. My weird tiebreaker brain will definitely be paying attention to Indiana.
Shoot.
Because again, I think I said this on the last time is so right now you got Oregon, Penn State, Indiana, all three of those teams 3-0 in Big Ten play. None of them play each other. So if now both Penn State and Indiana both still have Ohio State on their schedule. So Ohio State will definitely find their way into the conversation or at least impact how this all plays out. But if somehow Oregon, Penn State, Indiana, they all go undefeated throughout the entire season, one of those teams is not going to the Big Ten championship. And it'll go all the way down the tiebreakers. I was looking through I went not just the one that's on the standings page, but when they have the click here for the fine print where you can read all the tiebreakers. It was, it's probably, it would go down to the Sports Source analytics rankings. And right now, if you look at those, Oregon is the number 2 team, Penn State number 3, Indiana number 5. So I mean, that's nationally. That's not that's not in the conference. So it's like I don't think we're going to get to that point. I think something, especially with both of them having to play Ohio State, but it's possible. Chaos is possible.
Chaos is possible. Okay, I think it's going to be a beautiful, chaotic scene in a city that you called home for quite some time. I know your parents will probably be at the game. We've got Arizona hosting Colorado. It's a sellout. It's probably going to be standing room only. That kind of is what happens wherever Colorado goes. Both teams trying to get back in the win column, but really believe this is the best matchup individually of the season in college football, at least in two players that are dramatically proven in Travis Hunter as a DB and Tetairoa McMillan as a wide receiver. Jim, what are your thoughts and what does the data show us about what we think this matchup might become?
Yeah, I went digging around a little bit on these, which was fun here. And the funny, all these stats were from PFF, so crediting them through all this. But Travis last week, he got hurt in the first half, didn't play there. He only played 43 snaps last week, which, that's a full game for a lot of people. He played 23 on offense, 20 on defense. His previous low of the season was 122. He's played more on each side of the ball every week, both offense and on defense every week than he played in that game last week. So they said he's, expected to play. I saw him on a podcast with RG3, talking a lot of Heisman stuff, but it seems like he is ready to go. And talking about that matchup with the two of them. So last year, T-Mac had a big game in that game. He was targeted 15 times, had 9 receptions, 107 yards and score. So of those 15 targets, 5 of those were credited to when Travis was covering him. So when Travis was covering him, he had 5 targets, 3 receptions for only 15 yards, but that one score was with Travis covering him. Conversely, it was Cameron Solomon-Craig that he kind of went off a little bit more on. So it was 3 targets for T-Mac when Solomon-Craig was guarding him. He caught all 3 of those targets for 46 yards. 41 of those were yards after catch. And they kind of moved Travis around. T-Mac around too. He played 11 snaps in the slot. That's not completely unusual. He had 7 games last year where he played 10 or more snaps in the slot. So, you figure if he's there, that Travis is not necessarily guarding him there. But the one funny nugget was kind of like Montana Lemonious Craig, the former Colorado receiver, who had the touchdown in the spring game for Colorado and then hit the portal right after the game. Him against Travis last year, 3 targets, 3 receptions, 43 yards. 31 of those came on one play. So it'll be interesting to see how much Arizona schemes T-Mac to be away from Travis, because it doesn't seem like, at least based on last year, that Travis is just going to follow T-Mac wherever he goes. So hopefully we get a decent amount of snaps against each other. I know the NFL scouts will definitely, watching the game, will definitely hope that that's the case, but it doesn't, we'll see.
All right. Fun fact. I called that game last year and it was an epic game. And the T-Mac touchdown that you referenced, I jumped so high in the press box that they ended up showing it on TV. It was my celebration after the game. And of course I got destroyed for it because everybody knows that, I've known the staff at Arizona for a really long time. So look, you just call the game and you get excited by the game. If I was calling it this week, I'd be the same guy as well. I also think if I was calling this game, I'd have done a deep dive into Noah Fifita. I know you've watched every snap of him. He has struggled. This offense has struggled. It hasn't been what they expected to be. It hasn't been what they were. But it's different. It's a different offensive line. It's obviously a different coaching staff. Anything stand out to you, Jim? And what's the one thing you'll be circling in on around this Arizona offense outside of the matchup against Travis Hunter this week?
Well, speaking of Noah, and again, I'm not putting the blame on Noah. I'm just looking at the statistics. I'm not really sure where the blame should go, whether it's just something just not gelling there with, the quarterback, the offensive line, the staff, everything. But 4 straight games where his completion percentage has been lower than the previous week. 9 interceptions to 8 touchdowns this season. 5 interceptions the last 2 games. He had 6 all of last season. And it's weird because the sacks are not really up. So if you're looking at just on that part as far as the offensive line, but the pressures, the throwaways, the scrambles, those are all way up, and especially the throwaways. He only had 7 throwaways all last year, according to PFF. 23 already this year. So something is definitely off. It'll be interesting to see how they were able to fix that going into this week.
Yeah, I think they're a better team than their record shows. I think that they're better than even some of these scores. Like you see some of these lopsided scores we talked about earlier the week, whether it was BYU Arizona last weekend, whether it was UW Iowa. UW's got a bye week this weekend. They can just kind of get away from you, and I just think that's what's happened with Arizona, whether it was K-State, right? They're in that ball game. They don't have a lot of success early in the third quarter, and all of a sudden they lose by 3 scores or more. I think the same thing happened in this one to a degree against BYU. I think they're the better team. If I had to predict the game, I think they win the game. I think both quarterbacks, you could argue, I think they're the 2 best quarterbacks, 2 or 3 of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12, Avery Johnson being the other one. As we're going to get to Cam Rising being done for the season here in a moment. So I hope we get a great game. I know the crowd will be off the hook. I really think it's going to come down to which team can run the ball better with more efficiency. I really believe that's what's going to be, and which team can get a little pressure on their quarterback. So let's talk about the quarterback. TCU, Utah. If you love college football, you know this rivalry from way back in the day. Right now it's new. Coach Whittingham talked about it earlier this week. He was there against Gary Patterson. Of course, Sonny Dykes was not. But to that point, Cam Rising no longer going to play this year. And I just want to say this because it wasn't truly official when we had Nicole on earlier in the week. Cameron Rising, I believe, has done more for Utah football than any player in Utah football history, at least in the history that I know. I got it really exposed to them when Alex Smith was there, right? And he was phenomenal, right? Number 1 draft pick. He's become a friend and somebody obviously we all admire in a bunch of different levels. And I think he put them on the map. But I think going from where they went to a power league in the Pac-12 and the style in which they did, and for him having to transfer, he committed OU, transferred from Texas, and then when he got to Utah, he didn't get the treatment like a lot of other quarterbacks because he didn't have a high-priced lawyer. Like he had to sit out again, and he just kept hanging. And then when he got his shot, he took that place to another level. And to see him last year, when we called the Arizona-Utah game, I talked to him on the field before the game. I said, how has it been? He's like, it's been a hard year, man, because he knows the expectations. We know the transactional element now in college football around NIL, and he knew the expectations. And he was crushed around the injury. He did a beautiful story a year ago in The Athletic around that. Then to come back this year, Jim, we saw him at Big 12 Media Days. Was there a bigger smile at Media Days? No, man, not even close. He knew what he could lead this program to. It was unfinished business. It was the last dance. It was all those things. Like, I think in my heart of hearts, I always saw he and Kyle Whittingham walking off the field together, like for the last time in a Utah hoodie, polo, helmet, shoulder pads. And now he's done for the season. So I just want to say, like, thank you to him. And I would tell him what I tell every quarterback, which is give yourself the ability to pause right now on your decision. You're probably over college. It makes sense that you are. But give yourself the ability to pause and assess and come up for air in a couple weeks in that regard, and then make a decision. Do you have more eligibility? Can you petition for another year? I know that sounds bonkers, but again, it's a new era of college football. I'm not one of those that says, get him out, college is over, move on. I actually disagree with that. I think what college can do for quarterbacks like Cam Rising is better than what a free agent contract might do in the NFL. It's better than what a job would do in the real world. Like, I hope he pauses on this, and knowing him, he will, and consult with the right people.
Yeah. And I think obviously echo everything you just said, and to not regurgitate it. But I think one of the things I want to keep an eye on this week is like the uncertainty around his injury. I think and this is nothing against Cam, might have made things harder for that team this year. Always, looking over their shoulders. Cam coming back? Is he not coming back? Whatever like that. I think Isaac Wilson, his first start, he threw 3 touchdowns. Granted, it was against Utah State. But the next two games, as the questions were like, oh, is Cam coming back? Is Cam coming back? 2 interceptions in both of those games. So now that there's some certainty around that position, maybe they kind of find a groove with this. Isaac Wilson, feels a little bit more comfortable without like necessarily looking over his shoulder the whole time. And speaking of Big 12 quarterbacks, Arizona State, Sam Leavitt is now going to be out with an injury for that Cincinnati game. So Jeff Sims is going to start. They're going to reevaluate him after the week. So we'll see how, because they have a bye week next week. So we'll see how that goes. But it'll be interesting to see if ASU is able to kind of keep that momentum that they've built up going.
That's wild because he came back into the game. If you think about it, a week ago when he played in their incredible game, and now here comes a guy who talk about. Okay, I'm not I said it in our previous episode. I don't want there to be a spring portal, but if there's not, Jeff Sims is not at Arizona State either. Right? This is a guy who came in really late into this program. And remember, they lost, a huge name at quarterback. Ended up transferring to Georgia, their starter from a year ago, and now they got Sims and Trenton Bourguet in their quarterback room. So
yeah, Jaden Rashada went out.
Yeah, Jaden Rashada. Yeah. Okay, so quick bow on that. This weekend doesn't have the hype that last weekend's does, but the ACC, there is some hype around that. We got Clemson, Miami, Pitt Panthers. Come on now. SMU, they're all undefeated in conference play.
Shockingly, SMU. That's kind of crazy. And Clemson and Miami don't play each other during the regular season, so that'll be interesting to see.
I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're right on that. And why do those games matter? Because our guest is all over those games coming up here, Max Browne, in a moment. But also, Max covers the Pac-12, and we cover that here as well. You don't want two teams from the ACC or the Big 12 going to the playoff if you are Washington State, if you're trying to take a run here at the CFP. So we're going to talk about the ACC. We're going to talk about Max Browne's story. We're going to talk about, of course, the schools out here on the West Coast, notably Oregon State and Washington State. We're going to talk about a lot of things with our next guest. It is fueled by our founding partner, 76, keeping you in the know as you are on the go, a great friend, somebody we take great pride in watching him do his work. And he might be having an interview coming up on his own platforms that all of us around this beautiful world might want to tune into. So here comes our interview, our conversation with Max Browne. Here he is, Max Browne, presented by our founding partner, 76, keeping you in the know on the go. A guy who goes all across the country, literally. Max, you're covering the ACC, you're covering the Pac-12 this week. You're back on the West Coast, baby. What's up? But I'm curious, for you, how has this experience been? You're the lead analyst for the CW. So proud of you and happy for you. But what has been thus far the first 7 weeks of the season been like?
Yeah, appreciate that, Yogi, and thanks for having me on. It's been great. Going back to ACC territory. We're both Pitt Panthers. I know we both claim a little bit of USC and obviously Pac-12 roots, but Pitt Panther as well. So it's been fun, getting used to new programs, going to new campuses and whatnot. But I'm excited. I'll be back in Corvallis this week, and it's been fun, man, to see the things progress year over year. And obviously, was sad to. And I still say this on even if I go on ACC network. I was sad to see the OG Pac-12 go. I'm not afraid to say that. Still miss some of those rivalries and matchups. Not trying to live in the past, but anytime I can go back to a Pac-12 school, man, it feels like going home.
Yeah, no, I think the whole college football community, to a large degree, feels that. Especially as SC's going to Maryland. I'm going to call UCLA and Rutgers, right? Like, it's just different games than we're accustomed to seeing. So I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that as the leagues continue to change and shift. Before I get your opinion on like some specific things in football, I want to hear, like, have you had a second to zoom out on life? I mean, I vividly remember you at Elite 11, and then I can remember a coffee shop in Seattle where you're trying to figure out where you wanted to pivot to. And then you basically moved in like to my place for a
yes,
year.
Sir.
And now, like, you're thriving, and this year, and you're so great on social media. Everyone is probably already following you, and if they're not, you're making mistakes, so go do it. But I just am curious for you, man. Like, you decided to go all in college football as a content creator, of course, as an analyst, and it's a really cool path. I mean, you're still a young guy. I wonder if you've had a moment this year on these cross country flights to say, yeah, keep going for it, Max. Like, you set out to do this a long time ago.
No, I appreciate that. And I have had a second to think about it. And I think about our conversation on your couch in Venice at your your condo often. I remember telling you, I was like, I don't know if I want to go all in, or I convinced myself that I could somehow swing what we do without going all in. And I also said I don't want to be like a take guy, like a daily take guy. I remember saying that sentence to you. And then now I post daily football take videos on my social media. So it's funny how things change. But I just feel super grateful because when I sat on your couch, and that was 2018, I didn't love football. My love for football had worn away, and in large part because of how my playing career ended. And I don't shy away from that. I think there probably was some bitterness in there that things didn't end better for me as a player. But I also think a lot of that was natural. And I think a lot of players can relate to that when your football career doesn't end on your own terms. And I struggled with, for a few years there, of, man, do I want to be a media member, or like how to navigate this? I wasn't looking forward to waking up every day and reading what, hey, so-and-so was saying, or watching this clip of film, versus now it's swung back around 5 years later, which I'm super grateful for, where I do look forward to that. I'm excited to watch Oregon's defensive line bull rush Ohio State on my flight last night, kind of thing. And that's how I was as a player. So just feel grateful that kind of came full circle, and that love for football is back for me.
Yeah, nothing makes me happier than watching you succeed. I mean it, man. Of like all of the friends that we all have in the industry, watching you thrive. Every weekend I turn it on in our booth, and I'm just like, look at Max go. It's really amazing. And you are just getting going. So stay patient, like we've talked about. A year ago, I read an article about mental health, and it said the two most important characteristics of having a healthy life in between your ears is agency and gratitude. Agency is basically owning the decision that you have made, right? Whether it's, hey, I own that I was bitter towards football. I was as well. I think anybody who's put on pads when their career ends, other than maybe Tom Brady, like it doesn't end in the way in which you envisioned. And then gratitude for not just the present moment, but for what's coming in the future. Like I'm so excited for the future. And I just say that because I literally was talking to my wife this morning. I woke up because for me, it's a new experience too in the Big Ten. I'm waking up earlier than I ever have because I have to throw down and learn these teams. And when your alarm keeps hitting like 4:35 and you're like, after a while, like you just want to sleep. But when I put my feet down, I'm like, okay, like I don't have to go dig a ditch. Like I don't have to go build a house. I don't have to, crunch numbers. Like the numbers I'm crunching are third down. Like I want to go do these. And I think there's something to that of like, yeah, it's a grind and you're going from interview to interview and flight to flight, as am I. But how lucky are we for the moment, and then hopefully the future moments, to be able to do this when our kids are older, or you and your lovely wife maybe have a family. Like I think those two words are just really profound when it comes to anything that might be different or new in one's life.
Totally. Couldn't have said it better. And it's funny, as a guy who had 4 different competition battles in college and was always wired of like, this practice is the Super Bowl, and if I throw this pick, man, I might get benched, kind of thing. I have to remind myself that, especially because we work in an industry that's extremely volatile, and there's only so many chairs, and that mindset can kind of get into your head a little bit, that I have to remind myself of like, hey, however things shake out, like it doesn't need to be this unneeded urgency and maybe unneeded cutthroat mentality that I had to have when I was playing. That then is just, I don't have to bring it to broadcasting, which is always a reminder I have to give myself.
Yeah, no, keep doing it and find guys like our co-founder, Jim Thornby, because he taught me that when I was your age. And I think it really helped me now that I am in my early 40s. So let's get to some football a little bit, but not necessarily the traditional football. You, as you referenced, have takes daily on all of your amazing social media. You had one that was talking about the vice president candidate. I'm going to ask you about Tim Walz. Like, what has it been like? Because you recently posted a photo of you and he on the floor of the LA Memorial Coliseum. I'm assuming you sat down and did some sort of content with him. What can you share with us about your experience with someone who is clearly going to be front and center for the next month or so, and maybe even longer in this country as the potential vice president of the greatest nation on earth?
Yeah, it was the power of social media. It was crazy. I found out a couple months ago that he was a defensive coordinator. I was late to the party back in 1998, I believe it was, at Mankato West High School in Minnesota. And I was like, no way, I got to dive into what kind of scheme he was running and all that, just because I'm always doing, for those people that are watching, there's the whiteboard behind my right shoulder. And I it was funny. I kind of threw shade at him a little bit. I was coming after him like, this is how we're going to dice up your 4-4 defense kind of thing. And luckily he took it well and was like, I love this. And so the conversation we had in the Coliseum with Secret Service all parked up the tunnel. For those that have been to the Coliseum, you know how big that tunnel is. You're talking 3 Suburbans up there and having to get wanded in the whole deal. But we had a 5-minute conversation about the 4-4 defense, how he would adjust to today's game, how he would defend guys like Justin Jefferson and Randy Moss and Adrian Peterson and all that. And going back and forth there. And then we had a little rapid fire question that by the time this podcast goes live, I'm sure it'll be up on my social, but just asking him football specific questions. No politics in that conversation, all football with Walls.
Okay. So I'm going to imagine it's probably the most famous person you've ever interviewed.
Yep,
maybe,
definitely.
At least in the conversation. Okay. Okay. Fair. And that's a good thing. I'm curious for you because, you know, you recall yourself being a young kid, you probably dreamt of being an Elite 11 quarterback, and then you became one, and then you were a 5-star quarterback, and you know what it's like for people to admire you, and you know what it's like to admire others. But then when you get around them, I think we quickly find out like the realest ones, pretty normal. Like what can you characterize the vice president candidate's personality to be like?
Keep in mind, this interview was the Monday after Minnesota had beat USC, which, as we all know, is one of the bigger upsets this college football season.
Hey, we were there, baby.
You were on the call. I was listening to it on my plane ride. You and Guy, which was awesome. But this dude walks into the Coliseum with a Minnesota Gophers hat on, so he's just like, "Hey, I don't care if I'm at USC's home. Like, we're bringing it," which I respected. I was like, "Hey, if I'm gonna give you crap about your 4-4 defense, you can give me crap about my Trojans." When I say his Gophers just because that's his state, but that shows you kind of the personality they had, and it was an extremely easy interview. He puts you at ease, and the type of interviewee that when you ask him questions, he gives you stuff to work with, and you don't almost need to have scripted questions because it naturally flows. And it was a fun conversation.
Yeah, he is an elite communicator. And I'm sure he's proud to be rowing the boat near the Pacific Ocean at the Coliseum. That's amazing, Max. We'll be all over that on your social. Okay, I'm curious for you. You called an Ole Miss game earlier this season. You know Lane Kiffin, obviously, from your time as a recruit. What was it like, your experience going back and having a production meeting and calling a game with somebody who had an influence on your playing career?
Definitely a full circle moment, especially, I mean, I had 5 head coaches in college, but Kiffin's the guy that came to my high school state championship and is the guy that I signed on the dotted line for. But it was funny, like we hop onto the production meeting and I was like, "Yo, what's up, Coach Kiff? How we doing?" And Coach Kiff, he's got a lot of things going on. I think it was like, "Hey, Max, hope it's all well." And we got right into the conversation, which I almost was like, all right, business is business, which I respect. But he was great and came up to me at the game and was like, "Hey, happy for you," and whatnot. But it was full circle moment, and the X's and O's guy in me is always mesmerized. I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but when I was with Lane Kiffin, he was like the golden boy of the one carrying the torch for pro style under center fullback offense. And now he is on the total opposite end of spread them out, receivers hug to the sideline. It's the fastest game, and it was the most difficult game I've had to call in my career because of how fast Ole Miss was. And cough, cough, fake injuries. But it was a cool full circle moment, and just another reminder of how unique and unexpected, but how special my football journey's been so far.
Yeah, it's such a small world. To your point of 5 coaches for you in your career in college, Steve Sarkisian was another one of those. And I think you could offer unique insight and context into this, right? They've got Quinn Ewers, absolute rock star quarterback. They also have a really talented backup quarterback who people may know his first and or last name in Arch Manning. To that point, you've been the starter, you've been the backup, especially at USC. I've always said this and will believe it until the day I die, which is when you sign at SC, you're a household name, and when you start, you are a Heisman candidate. What advice do you have to backups that right now are live in a world where everybody's telling them they should be starting midway through college football because maybe their team has a loss or two, and or starters who are dealing with somebody who has a lot of notoriety that are behind them?
That there is a lot of power and a lot of success in waiting your turn. And my mindset at USC, and it didn't necessarily work out for me, but that, hey, 2 years at USC was better than 3 years at insert school or 4 years at insert school, because you want to play for play callers like Steve Sarkisian. You want to play around guys like that Texas has, and you want to develop. And I know for a guy like me, the outside world might have told me, hey, Max, you're ready to play tomorrow. Transfer to Washington State, and you can sling the ball around with Mike Leach kind of thing. But I knew in my heart I wasn't ready to play big-time Division I football as a true freshman, as a redshirt freshman kind of thing. And so I had to wait my turn. And obviously got stuck in a situation with Sam Darnold, who's now one of the best quarterbacks in the world right now. But there was certainly a world, and the blueprint that I always had was Mark Sanchez of wait your turn, and you can reap the benefits later on in your career when you are positioned to have success with all the pieces around you. And look at every quarterback in the National Football League right now. Jaden Daniels is a perfect example. Yes, he's a baller. Yes, he's having success, but that scheme around him, the play callers, all the pieces are in order for him to have success. And at the college level, when you wait your turn, especially at a program like Texas, and especially when your play caller is Sark, man, you can have a lot of success and reap the benefits in a much greater way than jumping ship at the first sign of not winning a competition battle.
Yeah, well, the college football world will be watching Texas this weekend with the matchup that they have, one of the better ones of the weekend. Let's talk about your matchup this weekend for a minute. You've got Oregon State. They're hosting UNLV, who is on fire right now. What have you learned about these two teams? What are you anticipating in your preparation to be an outcome, or maybe how the game might play out once Saturday gets here for kickoff?
Yeah, you can tell we're at mid-October with some of the roster attrition for Oregon State. I mean, I had them week 1, and going into that game, one of the concerns was their defensive line depth and some of the depth on the defensive side of the ball. And this past week, I think I saw 17 two-deep impact players are out or didn't play last week, which Oregon State, I'd make the argument no team in the country got poached more from the transfer portal than the Oregon State Beavers. Coupled with the fact that now you're getting into injuries midseason, like that's tough to handle. And credit them, they almost pulled out the win last week. But I think defensively for Oregon State, that's the thing that I'm intrigued with, because when you get injuries, we all know the deal. Usually you have to simplify your defense to allow those backups to play fast. Well, that's great, but you're facing a UNLV offense, the go-go offense that has shifts and motions and is extremely unique from an alignment standpoint, which, hey, just getting lined up is going to be tough for Oregon State. So that's going to be my first question to Coach Bray. But if I've learned anything calling 4 or 5 of Trent Bray's games over the years, he's going to have his bunch ready to rock.
Yeah, they will. And yeah, Coach Marion, another Pitt connection. He spent a little bit of time on the Pitt sideline as well. So make sure you tell him hello. I know you'll be dialed in on the UNLV scheme in advance of that game. Before we cut you loose, Max, what has it been like for you being with CW this year? First year that this league has had you calling games, second year that this network has been involved in college football.
It's been great, and they've poured a lot of resources into our broadcast, which I'm super appreciative of. It's fun working with Tom Brenneman too, who's a legendary play-by-play voice, and back in the booth after being out of the game for 4 years. And when he does his open and I'm sitting next to him, he's got that voice that it just feels like big-time college football, which is just an amazing feeling there. And it's cool, yeah, with different the added resources that they've given us and exploring these ACC schools. They're all in on this thing, and I think this is technically the second year for the CW in college football, but it feels like the first year where they're chips to the middle kind of thing. I think this is going to continue to grow. I hope to be a part of it, and it's fun being able to be on a national broadcast.
Yeah, well, I know how much they appreciate you, and the country does with your voice, as do we, Max, the pride of Mar Vista, as well as the Pitt Panthers and the Trojans, and now interviewing the potential VP and Tim Walz. Surprised he didn't have a Darnold jersey on as well, because I think Sam was there this past Saturday for the Penn State run out. But Max, I know you got to go. I know you got a lot going on, but I'll end it the way I started it. Congratulations to you. Stay connected to the moment, and it's just such a joy to watch you thrive as you continue to grow in your career.
Appreciate everything you've done for me, Yogi, and grateful to call you a buddy.
There it is. Max Browne of the CW and many other things. Check him out on all social media. It's the Afterglow. That was our conversation with Max Browne, fellow broadcaster, close friend Just love watching him grow and thrive. Of course, all of our conversations are presented on behalf of our founding partner, 76, keeping you in the know on the go, go, go. Jim, before I head out to New Jersey and get to Piscataway for the Bruins, let's recap Max's conversation. What'd you think?
Tell my people in Secaucus hello when you go.
Done and
to
done.
the Zoom
That's
junction
right.
there.
You live there. That's right.
Yeah, my old MLB Network days. Thanks for these trophies here for my MLB Network friends.
Shot him up.
Yeah, exactly. The coolest part, I mean, the most interesting part, obviously the stuff with Tim Walz is just insane. I remember seeing that comment on his tweet and sending it to you guys to be like, oh my God, can you believe this? Tim Walz just, commented on this, and then it all became a more thing. But as far as like more like an impactful thing, I thought was him talking about waiting your turn. And I know in this day and age, like that is difficult when there's NIL and everything else. But I feel like there's been so many people that you've interviewed here now in these last, 3 months or so that we've been doing, 3-4 months that we've been doing this show. A lot of the Elite 11 counselors, former Elite 11 counselors or current Elite counselors or coaches that have said kind of that same thing. Like, you picked that school for a reason. You picked this coach for a reason. Now, obviously, when a coach leaves, that creates a whole different dynamic. But you created this to kind of learn from these people and be a part of this program. And it's never easy to just turn down money or turn down another opportunity, but it's not always the best opportunity. So I liked what Max had to say about that. And obviously, it's a lot easier for someone when your last name is Manning, to be able to stick to those principles where money is not really something that you're overly worried about. But I've respected the way that Arch Manning has kind of gone about this whole journey at Texas. So I liked what Max had to say about that.
Yeah, I think when he referenced like the Mark Sanchez plan is one that resonated with me because I was coaching. I came in when Mark was a freshman, and we both left when he finished his 4 years at USC and declared for the NFL draft. And if you recall that era, and I'm a believer in this, it was Carson was balling, wins the Heisman. Leinart sat for a couple years. Castle sat for a couple years. And
Castle sat for all the years.
Yeah, Castle sat for all the years.
And still made it to the NFL.
Yeah. Still made more than anybody probably other than maybe Carson. But as Leinart was starting, Booty was sitting. As Booty was starting, Sanchez was sitting. Like, I just think there's something to sit, learn, and then go rip it versus learn on the job, learn on the fly. And we've seen a lot of quarterbacks who have played early, like Jeff Sims, we talked about earlier in the show. I believe he played as a true freshman at Georgia Tech. He's on his third school, right? He went Georgia Tech, Nebraska, Arizona State. Like, I think there's something because college football, yes, I think high school guys are as developed as ever. Like, they're prepared to play, but you still have to play against 22-year-old defensive linemen. Like, you still have to go to venues that are foreign to you. You still have to learn a system that might be different. You still are evolving as a young man. And to Max's point, sit, wait, doesn't mean you don't grow. And I think that's the thing. So many programs are now talking about how they're developmental programs. And you don't hear that a lot because of what NIL is. And you can go, quote unquote, buy a team. And I still think that the teams that will be there at the end of the year this year will be the ones that have really developed players. And yes, have added via the portal, but also have retained players. You talked about Oregon State, the amount of players that not only are injured, but also are playing for other schools. Right? We saw one of them against Cal 2 weeks ago, and Damian Martinez on the field. It's a part of the game, but I think the developmental thing is one that's really valid. And then I love the VP thing. I just think that's really cool. One of my favorite phrases, Jim, is we all speak ball. In my 20s, or even when I was Max's age, I would travel by myself with one bag and one ball to all these foreign countries. And I wouldn't know the language, but I would pull out a soccer ball, a basketball, a football, and just start playing. I can remember being in East Africa on the border of the Congo and Rwanda and just playing hoops for hours. Like, I can remember being in India. I can remember, like, there's so many spots that are flashing. Cambodia, they're flashing before my eyes right now where you're like, yeah, like, we all speak ball. So I love the fact of how we described his interview with the potential future vice president of this country. If we could be so lucky, somebody who knows sport right? Who knows ball, who can speak that way. I think that's a refreshing element for all of us. And I love that Max, was able to get some time with him and also described him as being a guy easy to talk to. Not surprised there. And was fired up for him. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny too, you talk about that development thing. I mean, it's kind of like you've already seen that trend through the NFL, like the last 20 years where, like Aaron Rodgers didn't start right away. Like, and now you look at a guy like Bryce Young, he goes to Carolina, doesn't have a lot around, a lot around him, and kind of gets buried, and then it's like, oh, he's it almost feels like they've kind of moved on in some ways. I don't think they've totally moved on from him, but there's that sense of like, oh, he's not it, like next, and it's just like it takes, just like it does at the NFL level, at the college level, it takes time for these guys to kind of develop. But the money has changed everything. First, it changed, with how much money in the NFL they were paying quarterbacks, and now that's trickled down to the, how much NIL or how much resources they're having to put into the quarterbacks at the college level.
Yeah, it's all fluid. Hopefully, it gets suitably controlled with some of this new legislation that'll be coming out. We'll make sure we talk about that when the games aren't front and center to talk about. I'm glad we talked about that. Big thank you to Max. Big thank you, of course, to Jim and our team here at Y Option. And for all of you founding members, keep joining. We appreciate it. We got some special things coming your way. This doesn't exist without our community here at Y Option. So please continue to share this conversation. Go to yoption.com. I'm really excited to go call a game in New Jersey, Rutgers, UCLA. My family's going to be there, Jim. And I don't think I've said this all year, but I cannot wait to write the newsletter on Sunday. You'll see why. That's a little bit of a tease.
Oh, teaser.
I've been thinking about this one for quite some time. So there we have it. Week 8. Enjoy. Lots of love. Stay safe. Peace.